Hello, Frizzle fools. The general consensus in the Dresden Files fandom is that Full Moon is the worst of the books. And if you want proof of that, all you have to do is watch a few tier ranking videos of the Dresden Files series, and you will find that Full Moon is usually last, occasionally second last. I know this because in prepping for this video, I checked on all of those tier ranking videos, and the nicest thing that anyone said about Full Moon was that it's not as bad as everyone says it is. Guys, Full Moon is my favorite Dresden Files book, and I will fight you on this. Just kidding, I'm not going to fight anyone on this. Diversity of opinions is a good thing. It just doesn't always feel the best when your opinion is the minority opinion. So in this video, I'm going to endeavor to explain why, yes, Full Moon really isn't as bad as everyone says it is. In fact, there's a lot to love in this book, and a lot that I do love in this specific book. So let's pick that apart. First, let's talk about tone and pacing. One of the special sauces of the Dresden Files, one of the things that I really love about the series is its chaotic nature. The mantra of the series can just be everything that can go wrong does go wrong. You think the hero's at a low point, and then he gets kidnapped by werewolves. You think the hero's at a low point then, and then he runs out of magic juice, and etc. The never-ending spiral to the bottom until the final triumphant accomplishment over evil in the climax at the end of the books. And in the entire series, I would say that this is not stronger than it is in Full Moon. Full Moon is the book where literally, going into the climactic battle, Harry is incompetent, cannot do magic, has been shot, beaten up, all of the above, cannot use one arm effectively, cannot use another leg effectively. He is magically and physically crippled in this moment. The stakes, yes, do get higher in later books in the series, but I would say it never feels more visceral than it does here in Full Moon. And I love that moment. And now I will address one of those things that I'm sure you guys are thinking about, where Full Moon is lame because it's too formulaic, because it's too predictable. You get in the beginning of a book a list of all the different types of werewolves. And then guess what? Every single one of those types of werewolves shows up and becomes a villain in this book. Again, contributing to the chaos feeling. And yes, it does kind of feel predictable and contrived that when this is the werewolf book, all of the types of werewolves are here. But I love that. I think people look at this trope of this story structure of the author handing you information and pretty much saying, this is a special secret tool that we're going to use later. But I love reading books like that. I don't think that books need to be wildly unpredictable. I get great satisfaction in holding on to these little nuggets of information about werewolves and then being able to apply those little labels to werewolves as I read the book. I like highly formulaic books. I love them, in fact. And yes, Full Moon might be the most formulaic of all the Dresden Files books, and that is one of the reasons why it's my personal favorite. People talk like being formulaic is always a bad thing, but I would say most of the times, honestly, it's a good thing and produces stories that I really enjoy. There's ways to surprise me, such as killing off Carmichael, that aren't subverting expectations just to subvert expectations in the narrative structure. And I think one of the other reasons that people often hate on Full Moon is because it's got very strong urban fantasy vibes. And this series is undoubtedly urban fantasy for all of the books. But in the first few books, it's more urban fantasy vibes, and then slowly the vibes become a little bit more towards epic fantasy. And nowhere is the urban vibe stronger than here in Full Moon. What do I mean by that? It's that magic isn't always the solution. Sometimes guns are the solution. You don't have to look any farther than Harry having barely any magical juice left in him at the end, and guns end up being much more useful. Or the moment in the police station where the person who is most effective, honestly, against the loup-garou is Murphy because she has silver bullets prepared. Or the moment where Harry is tied up with duct tape and he can't escape it with magic, but instead manages to get out of it just with a little bit of wiggling and positive attitude. In an urban fantasy story, sometimes the best tools aren't magic, but just modern ingenuity. And I adore that. But now, let's talk about what I have heard as the biggest complaint about this book, which is the role of Lieutenant Karrin Murphy in this novel. She is the head of the police branch, Special Investigations, who is the one investigating all of these werewolf deaths. And throughout most of this book, she is an antagonist towards Harry. She suspects him of being involved in these murders and doesn't trust him as far as he probably deserves. And the reason I think that this is most annoying is that it's a retread of their conflict in book 1, which was like the same conflict, and you thought that it was kind of resolved at the end of book 1, and then it turns out no, it wasn't. And yes, I do agree that repeating the same conflict from book 1 is annoying. And I wish that book 1 would have a different conflict so that this conflict in book 2 could shine. Because here's the sitch. I think when people say that Murphy is super annoying in this book, they are looking at Murphy through too much of a Harry Dresden lens. If we look at Murphy through Harry's perspective, which we are because he's like the narrator of this book. So you look at Murphy through Harry's perspective. She tries to invest him with very little evidence. She isn't giving him work at the beginning of the book. She's continually trying to catch him after he escapes her police custody. And she's very snarky whenever they reunite. Now, let's look at Harry from Murphy's perspective. Because Harry, from Murphy's perspective, is highly suspect. At the end of the last book, he was involved in the death of Victor Sells. He might say he didn't do it, but there's not really that much evidence towards that. Additionally, Murphy is under a lot of stress from her higher-ups at her job in this moment. They do not want her working with Harry, and they're pushing her not to. But she still takes the higher road, and when she acknowledges that I need Harry's help in this case, she reaches out and gets it. And she makes Harry promise to be honest with her and work with her as a full partner. And then what does he do immediately after that? He runs off on his own lead that he didn't tell her about. She also runs off on her own lead that she didn't tell him about, but I'll get to that in a minute. She then finds evidence that he is definitely involved in the killings. She puts him in handcuffs, turns around a minute later, and he is already escaping. She tracks him down in the Wolfwood, finds that he is with the other murder suspect, MacFin, manages to capture MacFin, but Harry gets away yet again. MacFin, surprise, is a werewolf, wolfs out, and attacks the police station. There is carnage. Harry comes in and helps to save the day. So then at this point, I would expect from Murphy's perspective that she's ready to accept Harry's help. He's obviously fighting against the werewolf. He obviously also knows much more than he's all telling. And she would probably want to collaborate with him and clear everything up at this point. But you know what he doesn't do? Stick around for questioning. He runs off again. And then, when Murphy encounters him again, Harry is right in the thick of the climactic battle, maybe has turned into a killer werewolf himself, is covered in blood, and yet, she still trusts him. She still works with him. She is still watching his back and trying to protect him in this fight. And you know what he does? He doesn't. He doesn't trust her in this fight. He's expecting that she is just going to shoot him unprovoked. After all of this, after Harry hasn't been working with Murphy, after Harry has not been respecting her position as an actual police officer who is investigating this case officially, after all of that, where she is just trying desperately to do her job and he's over and over getting in the way, he still doesn't trust her. He still thinks that she would murder him. So let me ask you this. Who is more annoying in this book? Because my vote is on Harry Dresden. And that is kind of the beauty of this book, that Harry and Murphy are foils to each other. They reflect each other. Harry doesn't respect Murphy's power and authority as a police officer, and Murphy doesn't respect Harry's power and authority and knowledge as a wizard. They literally both go investigating leads without telling each other after promising to work with each other. Like literally at the same time. In this book, they're the same type of person, just working at this problem from opposite sides, and both of them screaming internally at the other one, why won't you just follow my lead on this? I'm the one who should be taking the lead. This is my job. Because this book is a lot about power and responsibility. Can you tell that Jim Butcher is a huge Spider-Man fan and has written a Spider-Man book, which I do recommend? You can find my review of that book. I'll link it in the footnotes of this video. Harry has wizarding, power, and knowledge, and he takes that as it's my responsibility to clean up the supernatural messes. And then we have the counterpoint to him, which is the FBI Hexen Wolves, who also have been given magical power and feel that it is their responsibility to take down the crime. Yes, the way that they do it is going on unhinged murder sprees as werewolves, but their initial motivations were the same as Harry's. Harry holds himself up as, no, I am better than them. And yet, several times during this book, he takes deliberate kill shots at people. Most of them end up failing, but he does try. most of them with magic, which is a double no-no because it's against the laws of magic. Honestly, the true heroes of this book are the people who aren't Harry or the FBI, like the Alphas, the pack of other werewolves that are legitimately doing this to try to help, and who aren't willy-nilly taking kill shots at people. Or Susan, the wonderful sidekick and girlfriend in this book, who is also doing all that she can to help, logistically and emotionally. I love Susan in this book, which yes, does make it sad that she's not as good in book 3. But we're talking about book 2 now. In this book, Harry's morals are a little and that's honestly why I kind of love this book, because he's got an arc. His position at the beginning of the book is kind of like, this is my power and my responsibility, my turf. I am better than Murphy, I am better than any of these other vigilantes, the FBI goons, terrible. And then slowly throughout the book, he begins to accept other backup, other sidekicks, like the Alphas, like Susan, like Tara West. And yes, even Murphy and Marcone. And then he slips up again. He becomes a Hexenwolf. He accepts the dark magic of becoming a werewolf, and it totally twists him, and he almost murders a guy. And you know who pulls him out of it? Susan, because he trusted her enough to bring her along. And I love this moral conundrum for Harry Dresden, where he wants to be all high and mighty and say that he's the hero. But also, in this book especially, he has to confront the fact that he has some personal demons he needs to work through, that he has felt exactly how slippery the slope is for him towards becoming a supervillain. He almost slid right down that slope in this book, and was only caught from friends, because another one of the themes of this book is trusting people. Trusting the other vigilantes, that they also have a responsibility. It's not just you, Harry. If Harry had just trusted Kim Delaney from the very beginning of the book to be able to handle herself and had mentored her like she asked him to, then this book would have been a lot less bloody. A lot less people wouldn't have died if Harry had just been willing to take on a sidekick, to work collaboratively with people instead of having to be the one calling the shots. Another microcosm of this theme of Harry just needs to trust other people and work on a team is the showdown in the police station. Harry goes in with a disguise illusion spell that makes people ignore him. He's doing this because he's adapting his lone wolf, I will not work with anyone else persona. And then because he's so ignorable, he ends up being more ineffective in the fight because he can't raise the alarm. He can't get past the gate because people aren't paying attention to him. And it took him extra time to prepare that anyway, and he is just too late to do that. Imagine instead if Harry had just decided, I need to work with Murphy, and had explained to her and asked to be locked up in the same cell as Mr. Werewolf, and then had been able to contain him. That probably would have been feasible. But because of Harry's own flaw of not trusting people, he didn't do it. And finally, I would just like to give a shout out to John Marcone in this book. He is top-notch, fantastic. I love every moment he's on the page. He is manipulative, conniving, and smooth. Also, he has a prepared murder pit on his property, but don't worry about that. He's only working with the good guys in this book, because legitimately, he doesn't do anything evil in this book. He's only helping out. Just ignore the fact that he's a very competent killer with a murder pit in his backyard. It's fine, it's fine. Harry could honestly learn some things from Marcone about being a team player, because he rules in this book. So he's acting as, yet again, a foil to Harry. Harry might be good at the morality things most of the time, and Marcone might be bad at the morality things most of the time. But you know who's more effective, arguably, in this book? Marcone, because he's good at the teamwork things. The entire book, he's trying to work with Harry. He's trying to ask for police protection. He's trying to make it a team effort because he knows he can't take it all on himself. And I love this book for all those layers, for all those themes, for all those interesting messages and journeys for Harry to go on in this book of learning to work with people, of learning to trust others. And yes, it's especially annoying that in book 3, he seems to have forgotten this lesson, but I think that's more of a book 3 problem than a book 2 problem. In conclusion, Full Moon is underappreciated, in my opinion. It is my favorite Dresden Files book. I think there is so much in this book to pick apart and love. I rated this book 5 stars. Please, in the comments, let me know what you think about Full Moon. And yes, it's okay if you want to express dislike of this book. I promise I will not stab you over it. If you just want to comment an emoji, leave me a moon emoji. For all the werewolves, of course. Subscribe for more videos on Frizzle Fridays, and thank you for watching.